There's this saying that you can't escape a prison if you don't know you're in one. And I would add, and you cannot find the keys if you go looking in the wrong places. And so many times in our lives, we create these prisons for ourselves. And sometimes we're conscious of those prisons and those constructs we've created, and other times we're not. But there's so many times we go looking for those keys in the wrong places. We go looking for them in other people, or we go looking for them in other places, anywhere but within ourselves. This weekend, in preparation for the course that I've designed called Master Your Mind, Master Your Money, which is all about the science of getting rich. It's based on the book, The Science Getting Rich, and the principles in that book. And what's interesting is every time I create a program or I design something to share with other people, I go through this metamorphosis. And I'm not sure if other people have talked about this or explained this in terms of the things that they create, but it's certainly true for me. And part of that metamorphosis process, and you know, one of the great signs about that process is that you don't end up in the same place where you began. And you can't, right? Like if you were to end up in the same place where you began at the end of a course, you would be extremely frustrated. That's probably why there are so many people who have done so many personal development programs who are now feeling really jaded about their life and feeling really jaded about where they are, because they've become so increasingly aware of their situation, but they still don't have the tools to deal with them. They still don't have the ability to really set themselves free. And in a lot of ways, I think, well, let me tell you honestly, I believe that sometimes that's simply because they're just not honoring who they really are and what they really want for themselves and for their lives. So when I say that you go looking for the keys in the wrong places, and we go looking in other people and we go looking in other things, what set me on this path for the science of getting rich really was an inquiry. I had been going along in my business, doing all the things that everybody tells you to do, setting up lead magnets, running webinars, cold calling, doing all this stuff. And all that stuff is fine, right? It is action that supports the goal. But at some point, it just got really freaking complicated, more complicated than it had to be. So have a look in your life right now. Like if you look around, have things in your business or just in your life in general got more complicated than they had to be? Fuck. Life is not meant to be that difficult. I am convinced of it. So I started looking. I started looking at what was it going to take to simplify things and get back to basics. And I came across this book. So what I love about my life is that I will have a question and my questions always get answered, always. Not always in the form that I expect, so I've given up expecting what that form is, and not always from the direction I expect, so I've given up having an expectation around the direction, but they always get answered. So as I'm putting the materials of the course together for the science of getting rich, and obviously we're, you know, referring to that text a lot, I'm also looking for other resources that are going to help build the foundation of knowledge that this course and this book provides. And I found this book on the weekend. And I actually don't have the author right at my fingertips, but I can certainly put a link to it in the post at the end. But the book is called How to Unlock Your Subconscious Mind. Now there's so many books like that, and so you would be forgiven for thinking that you had come across this book and you know exactly the book that I'm speaking about. But I had not come across this book before, and as I said, I had this question in my mind. This book appeared. It was 2:30 in the morning on Saturday when I came across this book. This is a pretty good indication that my subconscious was doing the work to answer my question. And so I started reading, and I read all day on Sunday. And there's this, the book talks about your, I think he refers to it as, or they refer to it, so a man and a woman, the supreme subconscious want. So it's the thing that you really, really want. And maybe you don't talk about it, you don't admit to others, let alone yourself, that this is what you really want. And what's interesting about the supreme subconscious want, I'm going to call it SSW from now on, supreme subconscious want, is that it's a base level want. So you know how in Born Rich, in Bob Proctor and other people who tell you how to set goals, that you've got to get into the minutiae of that goal and really visualize every detail. You know, if you want that house, you're going to see the street, you're going to see the trees lining the street, you're going to walk into the house, you're going to see, you know, the crystal chandelier and everything that you want. Well, this book, it takes away from all of that. And it just talks about this baseline want. And so it gives an example in the book, and I want to use this example, that a gentleman, you know, that they had interviewed or talked to as part of writing this book said that he really, 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 really wanted a college degree. And he never got one. And that was his regret, that he never got a college degree. What he did instead was he got married. And what they did was they through the book, they start to dig through the surface of that. And so one of the premises of the book is that you always get what you want. You always get what you want. So you might trick yourself, lie to yourself. You might convince yourself that you want a college degree in this case. But what you really, really, really wanted was to get married. And what you really, really, really want always and invariably has a way of manifesting and coming true. And I thought that was really interesting, because how many times have you set a goal and you've put blood, sweat and tears, I mean so much effort, you've tried so hard to reach that goal, and it didn't come to fruition, like nothing happened. And then you had a mind to ask for something in a really fleeting way, something that you wanted. And it didn't have to make sense. And it didn't have to put $1 million in your pocket. And you just wanted what you wanted. And it was this fleeting thought. You put no effort into it. And bang, it just materializes. Have you had that experience before? I know I have. I spent years trying to analyze goal setting, because there were so many times where I would work on this goal and I would work and work and work and work and chip away and do all the things, and nothing would happen. I wouldn't get any closer. And then I'd have this fleeting thought about, oh, I want this, and this just materializes with no effort on my part. And this book was the first book I have ever come across that talked about your wants and your desires in a way that made sense, was so truthful and honest insofar as being able to make that distinction between what you say you want and what you really want. Sorry, just a little readjustment for the wind. I'm hoping the sound isn't too bad and you can stay with me on this. So the distinction between what you say you want and what you really want. I think to bridge the gap between those two is, well, I think there's a lot of things. I don't think it's simple. But I do think that it starts with an honoring process, the ability to honor yourself, that you are a good person, that you, I'm going to get emotional here, but that you deserve to have what you want, that you don't have to justify it or exploit it or somehow pay penance for it. I think that there are processes that you have to go through, for sure. But, you know, I started this whole talk today was about that it has become more complicated than it really needed to be. And so how do we take it back to being simple? And I think one of those first steps is through that honoring of self and just allowing self to just be. And for that voice that's inside of you, that the real want that's inside of you to speak. Here's the thing, and there's always a price to pay, but the price to pay, you know, it doesn't have to be, I was going to say life-changing. No, I don't mean that. The price to pay is that it usually is life-changing, and you want it to be. You absolutely want it to be. It's not always easy. The price to pay is not always easy. That's probably a more appropriate thing to say. But you always, in my experience and what I've seen in other people's lives and what's been written about, are always for the better in the end. Because the alternative is that you don't honor what you really, really want. And you get to the end of your life, and those things that you feared, and those things that you resisted, and those things that you just didn't want to have to face come looking for you. And you're older, you have less energy, maybe you have less support around you, as often happens for people as they get older. And you're not mobile as much, and there's a lot of time on your hands, and you have to think. That's what people do. They end up thinking about their life, thinking about all of those things. And so the alternative for not honoring yourself and what you want is that at some predictable point in the future, because you're going to have to deal with that you didn't do that you didn't honor yourself and listen to that voice. And it's heavy. And I don't think that that's what life is about. I often tell the story about leaving a well-paying job to head out in the outback for 8 months during the middle of COVID, and how that was the most profound experience of my life next to having my daughter. And the reason why it was so profound is because I honored what I needed to do for me. It defied logic to leave a well-paying job, but I just needed to go. And I had the time of my life. And as I'm, writing this course and putting my medicine into this course for those of you who choose to participate, I'm reflecting on what was it about that time. And I realized that, part of the lesson in this book about the SSW is that what we really want for ourselves and our lives, I've got paper flowing away, is very much a subconscious want, obviously. It's called the supreme subconscious want. Hang on, I'm going to get that paper. Oh, but the other thing about it is that it is really guttural, basic feelings, basic emotions that we want to experience, and that we want our lives to be, I want to say governed, but that's probably not the right word, like driven by. And so when I read that on the weekend, it got me thinking about this experience of being in the outback and what it was. I had saved up some money, so I had some money in the bank, and I was working, just doing bar work. And it wasn't that, I was not concerned for money. It was that I was completely free, happy, and totally at peace. And that's what made that experience life-changing for me, life-altering. And so when I get that in my present-day existence, it's like there is, to some degree, and I will be honest with you, an absence of that right now. And part of being in the business and building it is all about doing that. And then because I read this book, it had me take another step back and really reflect on If the business is a means to an end, what is the end that I'm really gunning for? What am I looking for? What do I want ultimately? And what are those base instincts, those base feelings that my SSW is really trying to attain and help me attain? Because you're always going to get what you want. Remember that. It's just, are you willing to get out of your own way to get it? And so coming back to that saying of like, you can't escape a prison when you're in one. Well, if you're looking for the keys in all the wrong places, you're not going to get out of the prison either. So first we've got to recognize that we're in this prison of our own making. Secondly, we need to recognize that we actually have those keys. They're in our possession, but we're not utilizing them. We are looking for things outside of ourselves for the answer. And I want to bring it back to that simplicity. So I'm going to finish off this talk today with a poem that I read this morning that I think, well, not that I think, it's a poem that I read this morning that completely touched my heart. And I know that this poem and my message today, as a little disjointed and all over the place that it might be, I hope you followed it. I hope it made enough sense to you, and I hope that it landed right in your heart. That's my ambition. And so I'm going to leave you with this poem and leave you today in this contemplation. Okay. I'll put a link to where I got this poem from. I'm actually going to create a little Canva thingy. So if you want, you can download the bookmark or whatever I end up creating with this poem on it, just so that you've got a copy of it, okay? And it'll say, oh, it's by Thomas. Oh, I did know enough to put the author on there. It's by a gentleman called Thomas Merton. Okay. It says this. Life is this simple. We are living in a transparent world, and God shines through in every moment. This is not just a fable or a nice story. It is living truth. If we remember God, abandon ourselves to God, and forget ourselves, we may see this truth. God manifests everywhere in everything. We cannot be without God. It's impossible. It's simple impossible. Love and light, everybody. Have a wonderful day.